Welcome back, friends. Now, in our previous episode, Timur had just arrived at Delhi. Whilst we continue from there, what we'll do is we'll just go forward a bit, the year 1556, and 23rd, 24th January 1556. There was a devastating earthquake in China, one of the most devastating the earth has witnessed in whatever memorable history. And more than 230,000 people died in China. The epicenter was there, but the tremors were felt across, and about 100 plus died in India. One man died in Agra. This one man was Humayun, one of the Mughals. What happened was that he was, in all probabilities, sitting on a scaffolding because of his love for books. He was browsing the books in his library atop a scaffolding, which, due to the tremors, shook, and then he slipped and fell. When he fell, he hurt his temple, and within 3 4 days, he died. Though the mainstream narrative is that he's got the habit of kneeling down at the call of azan, and when he heard that, he tried to kneel down, and his robe got stuck between his foot and the knee, and he just stumbled and fell, and he died. Well, we'll have to leave it at that. Uh, but then he had barely ruled for 1 or 2 years after having returned from exile, where he was exiled, where he was with the Shah of Iran, Shah Tasmap at that time, for 15 years, where he took the Shah's army and the Shah's help and then came back and reconquered India after Sher Shah Suri had banished him, where he fought in battles and he fled. And he fled all the way back to Iran. But then let's go back to where we had left off in the previous episode, which is the advent of this scourge of Timur. Timur arrived in India after he had sacked Moscow. 10 years after that, he was in India and he went on to sack Delhi. Along the way, he had picked up many slaves from the local populations, and now these slaves were slowing down the progress of his army. So, what did he do? He ordered 100,000 slaves to be butchered. I mean, look at the cruelty of the fellow. I mean, he could have set them free, after all, they were slaves, but no, he had to get them killed. So, 100,000 Hindus or the local population who were captured as slaves along the way were killed. And you can imagine then what he would have unleashed upon Delhi. So, as it happens, he unleashed his savagery on Delhi to such an extent that they say that it almost took 100 years for Delhi to regain its original glory. And Delhi in those days was one of the most greatest capitals on the earth in terms of wealth and opulence and richness and architecture and everything. But anyway, Timur is considered as one of the unassailable generals of military history, where he never lost a battle because he fought on all sides, and he wherever he went, he won. But what mainstream history tries to gloss over or ignore or not acknowledge is that he further from Delhi he went on to Meerut, and there he had to contend with Ram Pyari Gurjar. Now, Ram Pyari Gurjar, what happened was that she got together an army of women and men, 40,000 women and about 80,000 men. And they were drawn from all, the Jats, Gurjars, Brahmins, Rajputs, Ahirs, Valmiks, and hill tribes. And this army, what they did was that they banged upon the scorched earth policy, so that as the Timur's forces advanced there, they could not find much to loot or much to sustain upon. That frustrated them a lot, and however, further they had to contend with these two armies. And what Rampyari Gurjar did was, at night time, the ladies would attack the army of Timur, and during daytime, the men folk would engage in battle. After a few days, this became untenuous because the Timur army could basically not get sleep and could not rest. That made them very weak, and they started retreating. And on their retreat, they then went on towards Haridwar, where again the same strategy was met, and he was badly beaten from there too. And he had to return all the way back. But in that battle at Haridwar, a 22-year-old Jat by the name of Harbir Singh Gulia, he hurled a spear at him, which actually hit Timur on the chest. And he luckily survived that, but then, of course, 6 years later, he died for whatever reasons. But then Timur, after that, never attacked India again. He just left. However, he left some of his henchmen at Lahore, but he left Delhi and all those regions and went back. So, this great commander, Timur, who never lost anywhere, actually lost to a lady warrior in India. Tughlaq dynasty, which was ruling Delhi when Timur attacked, fell considerably weakened, which was followed by the Sayyid, but barely one or two generations, and then came the Lodhis. The Lodhis also, again, it was one or two generations, and like I had said earlier, that out of the 35 sultans in this whole 300 or 320-year period, 19 were assassinated. And of course, even under the Lodhis, it was the time of Ibrahim Lodi. Now they were considerably weakened. We must remember one thing here. You see, these invaders can come and they might sometimes loot and go, but whenever they stayed back, particularly like the sultans, and they tried to rule, you must understand that this was a 10,000-year-old civilization which had its whole set of governance, frameworks, rules, social fabric, social methodologies, and everything. Now, when these people come, sometimes they just preside upon it, but most often they try to tamper with it. And this is what happened under the sultans, more so under the Lodi government. What happened was that the panchayats were replaced. There were qazis who were now governing those places. They had brought in the jizya tax and all those things. So the social fabric got badly disturbed. And in this case, what happened is that because of that, all the trade routes that were there from all the coastal areas in the south, etc., were closed. They did not have anything. So the whole, the population got isolated where they were, and obviously it affected the strength of the central region of Delhi, even though it still remained a very prosperous area comparatively in world civilizations. Yet from its own earlier part, it was considerably weakened. This was the time when Babur attacked Ibrahim Lodi in the famous first battle of Panipat, which Ibrahim Lodi lost, and then Babur reigned there. But then again, in my school books, we had read that Babur was invited by Rana Sanga. Now, Rana Sangram Singh and the Rajputs, somehow I always felt uncomfortable with this, because this is not part of their ethos to invite a barbarian so that he'll loot and go and the central power will get weakened and then these guys can then prey upon it. They are not that kind of people. And as it so happens, thanks to social media and the research of other scholars, I do come across references from Babur Nama which were brought forward, wherein it is clearly stated that one of the uncles of Ibrahim Lodi, Daulat Khan, he was the governor in Lahore, and for some reason he invoked the wrath of Ibrahim Lodi. Because for a meeting he sent his son and he did not go, which angered Lodi very much, and he kind of showed him what he might do. The son came back and duly reported. This scared Daulat Khan very much, so that he went across to Kabul. He sent his son to Kabul and invited Babur to come attack and that he will join him along with it. So that is what happened, and Babur then came along, Ibrahim Lodi, to the Battle of Panipat, where Ibrahim Lodi lost, and the Mughals. Most loved Mughals started reigning in Delhi. But Babur barely ruled for 4 years when he gave it over to his son, because he died, and his son was Humayun. And Humayun ruled for about 10 years before he was driven away by Sher Shah Suri. And then he fled to Iran, and then his return, and then his death. We just mentioned about that. Now, Humayun has been presented to us as a kind and gentle soul. But then every time he won over his city, he would appear in front of his soldiers every day. And if he's wearing ochre red robes, it means that he's still angry. And that would mean that they have a license to loot and rape and whatever, mayhem till the next day's appearance, till he finally appears in probably mellowed down colors like a purple or whatever, and then the looting would stop. Now imagine his cruelty. En route to Delhi, in Kabul, he defeated his brother Kamran Mirza. He had him imprisoned and he had him blinded by pricking pins into his eyes and threw him in the dungeons. Every time that Humayun would want to go meet his brother, they will sprinkle some lemon juice into his eyes so that in that throbbing pain he would then talk to his brother. Now, after Humayun comes Akbar. Now you see Akbar by time he came and took reign again, unfortunate in a battle where Hemchandra, that is Hemu, was accidental arrow hit his eye and he was dislodged from his elephant, and that led to his unlikely, but it happened. It's his defeat. Unfortunate. However, Akbar reigned there, and Akbar as cruel as all the rest of them. But the thing that Akbar did was he realized that if he had to govern this land, he had to follow its rules and tenets. So he then brought over Raja Todarmal to assist him in that. And Todarmal actually, once again, all the land rights, all the land management acts, and all those kind of things, he revived, and he made sure that the civilization's normal practices started continuing again. And this helped Akbar to then consolidate his hold on the region and gain more territory. And so he was now, there were certain kingdoms that did not submit to him, and the most famous of them is Rana Pratap. Now, Rana Pratap, as we read of him, is what we were once again told in our history books. He lost in the Battle of Haldi Ghati, and then after that, he took a vow that until and unless he dislodges the Mughals from his territories, he will never sleep on a bed and he will eat rotis or bread made of grass, wild grass. And now we think that maybe that is how Rana Pratap died finally in the jungle, poor chap, because nobody told us what happened after that. Unfortunately, this is a very skewed narrative that we glorify the people who came from outside and neglect our own native sons. What actually happened is that after the Battle of Haldighati, Rana Pratap regrouped. And once Rana Pratap regrouped with the help of finances from Bhamasha, he once again got together his armies and then he attacked and he recovered all the areas from Akbar. And this is called the First Battle of Divire. Now you see, Battle of Haldi Ghati happened in 1576. 6 years later, in 1582, this Battle of Divire took place, in which Rana Pratap regained all his territories, barring some probably a fortress or two. And he ruled for 15 years in his palaces. He lived there, and then in a hunting accident, he died 15 years later. So on his deathbed, Rana Pratap summoned his son Amar Singh and told him never to bow down to the Mughals. As it so happens that in 1606, now by that time it was Jahangir because Akbar had died, and Jahangir still wanted to go back and capture those territories. So he sent a large army to be able to, because he asked Amar Singh to submit, Amar Singh refused. So he sent a large army to subdue him. This was the second battle of Devire, and this happened in 1606. And in that battle, again, Amar Singh defeated him. He sent some commanders. One of them was Sultan Khan, and Amar Singh threw a spear at him so viciously that the spear pierced Sultan Khan and his horse, and both died. So this battle was again won by Amar Singh. This is the story of Mewad and the other areas. And these are the stories and these are the facts of history and the perspectives from which we should be looking at how things happened rather than the way we have so far been used to. So these are the stories of valor where Bharat-varsha fights back against these people who seem like they come and settle down, but then they're essentially outsiders. It doesn't matter if one of them marries some local woman or whatever, but then in essentially they are people who have unleashed unheard of atrocities over the Indian population at that time. And as it goes on, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and then Aurangzeb, it will just only go, these atrocities will only go on increasing. But we will talk about them in our future episodes. Thank you so much, listeners and friends, for being with me. Thanks.